I had never anticipated that returning to my childhood home would result in anything beyond a tranquil and uneventful summer. Having just celebrated my 23rd birthday and completed my college education, I found myself uncertain about my future direction. My father, Tom, along with his new wife, Linda, extended an invitation for me to stay with them. They suggested that this arrangement would allow me to save some money while I contemplated my next steps. Although Linda was 64 years old, her appearance belied her age. She exuded a vibrant energy, possessed a warm smile, and had a remarkable ability to make those around her feel comfortable. My acquaintance with Linda was limited, as she had married my father a few years after my mother's passing, yet they appeared to share a genuine happiness. I was pleased for my father's newfound joy. Linda was consistently considerate, inquiring about my day and ensuring that I had all I needed. While it felt somewhat unusual to have her in my life, her presence brought happiness to my father, which was my primary concern. One Friday night, I was up late in my room scrolling through job listings on my laptop. The house was quiet, my dad already asleep. I was feeling restless, unsure about my future, worried I'd end up stuck here with no direction. I sighed, leaning back in my chair, and that's when I heard a soft knock on my door. "Jake, are you still awake?" Linda's voice came through the door, soft and soothing. "Yeah, I'm up, come in." I called back, closing my laptop. Linda opened the door and stepped inside wearing a light nightgown that flowed around her like a soft breeze. Her hair was loose, falling around her shoulders. She looked different, more relaxed than I'd ever seen her. She smiled at me, her eyes kind. "I thought I heard you moving around in here, couldn't sleep." I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Just thinking about stuff, you know. Jobs, life, that kind of thing." She nodded, walking over to sit on the edge of my bed. "It's a big transition, finishing college. It's normal to feel a little lost." "Yeah, I guess," I said, looking at her. I noticed how the light from the hallway highlighted the lines on her face, the years of experience and life. She had a certain grace, a beauty that was different from the girls my age. I felt a strange comfort in her presence. "Your dad and I were talking earlier," she said softly, "and we both agree that you have plenty of time to figure things out. You don't need to rush into anything." I nodded, appreciating her words, but there was something in the way she was looking at me, a softness in her eyes that made my heart beat a little faster. "Thanks, Linda, it's good to hear that," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. She smiled again, her hand reaching out to touch my arm. Her touch was gentle, but it sent a shiver down my spine, you know. "Jake, you remind me so much of your father when he was younger, so full of potential, so strong." I felt a blush rise to my cheeks. "Really? I guess I never thought about it like that." She nodded, her eyes not leaving mine. "Yes, you do, and I know you'll find your way just like he did." There was a pause, a silence that felt heavy with unspoken words. I didn't know what to say, how to respond. I just looked at her, feeling a strange pull, a connection that I couldn't quite understand. And then, without thinking, I reached out and took her hand. It was a simple gesture meant to be comforting, but the moment our hands touched, something changed. Her eyes widened slightly, and she looked at me with a mixture of surprise and something else, something deeper. "Jake," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "What are you doing?" I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. Don't know, you make me feel." I couldn't find the words to explain what I was feeling, the confusion, the desire, the connection. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "This is unexpected," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "but I feel it too, this connection between us. I don't know what it means, but I can't deny it." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. This was Linda, my stepmom. She was married to my dad. This was wrong, wasn't it? But as I looked at her, the way her eyes shone in the dim light, I couldn't bring myself to pull away. "I don't want to hurt anyone," I said, my voice shaking, "but I can't stop thinking about you." Linda, she closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. "Jake, this is so complicated. I love your father, but you've awakened something in me that I thought was gone, something I can't ignore." My hand tightened around hers, my mind a whirl of emotions. "What do we do?" I asked, feeling lost, desperate for some kind of answer. She opened her eyes, looking at me with a mixture of sadness and longing. "I don't know," she admitted. "I just know that I can't pretend this isn't happening, but we have to be careful. Jake, we can't let this hurt your father. We can't let it destroy everything." I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "I don't want to hurt him. I don't want to hurt you either, but I can't deny how I feel." She leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Maybe we need to take some time, figure out what this means, see if it's real or if it's just confusion." I nodded again, my heart aching. "Yeah, maybe that's a good idea." We sat there in silence for a long time, our hands still clasped together, the weight of our situation pressing down on us. I knew that whatever happened next, nothing would be the same. We had crossed a line and there was no going back. Linda stood up, her hand slipping from mine. "We should get some sleep," she said softly. "We'll talk more tomorrow." Okay, I said, my voice thick with emotion. She turned to leave, pausing at the door to look back at me. "Good night, Jake," she said, her voice filled with a sadness that echoed in my heart. "Good night, Linda," I replied, watching as she closed the door behind her. I sat there in the dark, my mind racing, my heart heavy. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. My life was about to change in ways I couldn't even imagine. And as much as it scared me, a part of me couldn't wait to see where this new path would lead. The silence in my room was deafening. After Linda left, I felt a mixture of guilt, confusion, and a pull towards something that felt both wrong and irresistible. I couldn't shake the memory of her touch, the way her eyes had softened when she looked at me. I knew I should be angry at myself for even considering any of this, but I wasn't. I felt alive in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. The next morning, I tried to go about my day as if nothing had changed. I joined Linda and my dad for breakfast, making small talk about the weather and my job search. My dad was in a good mood, talking about his plans for the weekend, blissfully unaware of the tension between Linda and me. I stole a glance at Linda. She looked calm, her smile as easy as ever. But her eyes found mine, and I knew she was thinking about last night just like I was. After breakfast, my dad left to run some errands, leaving Linda and me alone in the house. I was in my room pretending to look for jobs online, but I couldn't focus. My thoughts kept drifting back to Linda, to the way her hand felt in mine, the way she'd looked at me. A knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. I knew who it was before I even answered. "Come in," I said, my voice sounding too eager. Linda stepped inside, closing the door behind her. She looked at me, her expression serious. "Jake, we need to talk." I nodded, my heart racing. "I know, I've been thinking about it all morning." She sat on the edge of my bed, just like the night before. "Jake, I've been thinking too about what happened. I'm so confused. Part of me feels so guilty, but another part can't stop thinking about you." I felt a rush of relief. At least I wasn't the only one feeling this way. "I feel the same," I admitted. "I know it's wrong. Linda, you're my stepmom and dad. He doesn't deserve this. But when I'm around you, I can't help it. There's something between us. I know you feel it too." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and longing. "I do, Jake, but I don't want to hurt Tom. He's a good man and he's been so good to me. I don't want to betray him. But I also can't lie to myself about how I feel this connection between us. It's real." I moved closer, sitting beside her on the bed. "Linda, I don't want to hurt anyone either, but I can't deny my feelings. We need to figure out what this means for both of us." She looked down, her fingers playing with the edge of her dress. "Jake, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if this is just a phase or if it's something more. But I do know that I care about you more than I should, and I can't keep pretending that I don't." I reached out, taking her hand in mine again. This time she didn't pull away. "Then let's take it one step at a time," I suggested. "We don't have to figure everything out right now. Let's just see where this goes. Be honest with each other and take it slow. We owe that to Dad and to ourselves." She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine. "Do you really think we can do that? Keep this, whatever this is, from your dad?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I was trying to convince her or myself. "We'll have to, at least until we know what this is. I don't want to cause any pain, Linda, but I can't ignore this either." She squeezed my hand, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Okay, Jake, we'll take it slow. See where this leads, but we have to be careful if your dad ever found out." "I know," I said quickly. "I'll be careful, I promise." For the next few weeks, Linda and I navigated this new, uncharted territory. We spent time together, talking late into the night after my dad had gone to bed. We went for long walks, just the two of us, talking about everything and nothing. The tension between us was always there, a constant undercurrent that we couldn't ignore. We hadn't crossed any more lines, but every touch, every glance felt like a step closer to something we both knew could change everything. One evening, after one of our long walks, Linda and I sat in the backyard watching the stars. My dad was out with friends, giving us a rare moment alone. We talked about life, about my future, about her past. As the night grew darker, the conversation turned more personal, more intimate. "Do you ever think about what might have been?" I asked, my voice low. She looked at me, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "What do you mean, if you hadn't married my dad? If things had been different, do you think we would have?" She smiled softly, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Jake, life is full of what-ifs. But right now, in this moment, I'm here with you, and that's all that matters." I reached out, taking her hand. "I'm glad you're here. Linda, I don't know what I would do without you." She squeezed my hand, her touch warm and comforting. "I'm here, Jake, and I'm not going anywhere." As we sat there under the stars, I knew that whatever happened, we would face it together. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be challenges, doubts, and maybe even regrets. But for now, we had each other, and that was enough. In the weeks that followed, Linda and I continued to explore our feelings, cautiously navigating the thin line we were walking. We kept our relationship secret, careful not to let my dad or anyone else see the bond growing between us. It was a delicate balance, one that required constant vigilance and honesty. And then one day, everything changed. It was a Saturday afternoon, and my dad was out playing golf with his friends. Linda and I were in the living room, talking about my plans to move out and start a job I had recently landed. We were laughing, the conversation light and easy. When the door opened unexpectedly, my dad walked in, his face red, his eyes filled with anger. He had forgotten his golf clubs, and had come back to get them. He stood there looking between us, his expression darkening as he saw the way. Linda and I were sitting close together, our hands almost touching. What's going on here? He demanded, his voice shaking with anger. Linda and I jumped up, guilt written all over our faces. Tom, it's not what it looks like, Linda began, but my dad wasn't listening. How long has this been going on? He shouted, his eyes blazing. How long have you been sneaking around behind my back, Dad? Please let us explain, I said, trying to calm him down, but he wouldn't listen. He turned and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. Linda and I stood there, stunned, the reality of what had just happened, crashing down around us. The secret we had tried so hard to keep was out, and there was no taking it back. I knew that we had crossed a line, one that we couldn't uncross. The fallout from this would be devastating, not just for Linda and me, but for my dad as well. In the days that followed, the house was filled with tension. My dad barely spoke to either of us, his hurt and anger palpable. Linda tried to talk to him to explain, but he refused to listen. I could see the pain in his eyes, the betrayal. He felt it tore me apart to know that I had caused it. Eventually, I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't stay in the house, not with the tension, the anger, the hurt that filled every room. I packed my bags and told my dad I was leaving. He didn't say much, just nodded, his eyes hard. Linda looked devastated, but she didn't try to stop me. She knew it was for the best. As I walked out the door, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I couldn't stay. I needed to find my own way to figure out who I was and what I wanted. As much as I cared for Linda, I knew that our relationship had been built on a foundation of secrets and lies. It wasn't fair to my dad, and it wasn't fair to us. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it. I knew there would be challenges, but I also knew that I would never forget the lessons I had learned. The feelings I had experienced. Life was messy, complicated, and full of unexpected twists. But it was also beautiful, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next.